It's my great pleasure to welcome Phil Spray, who's head of Alchymy Viols, who will be joining us at Christ Church Cathedral on 14 May for a program that we're calling In Song and Verse. Phil, it's so good to see you.
Good to see you, Chris, and thank you for having us for this concert. This has been a long time dream, getting to do this with you and your choirs.
Yeah, we first collaborated. We've gotten to collaborate a lot now, which I just love. But we first collaborated in a program doing singing Buxtehude together way back when, a lifetime ago, the week before the pandemic really started in earnest.
It was my last concert before the pandemic. Yeah, that's right. So I have very fond memories of that.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited that we get to collaborate again. So Phil, I wonder if you could tell me about Alchymy Viols. First of all, what the heck is alchemy? And second of all, what the heck are viols?
Good two-part question. For those watching this who know the viola da gamba, you know that it's an instrument from the Renaissance, 6 strings, different member from the violin string quartet family. For those who don't know the instrument, if you were to take an old guitar, curve the bridge, and bow the guitar, basically you would have a viola da gamba. It died out before 1800, and there is no modern counterpart for that. There has been a resurgence of viola da gamba consorts, which means consort means a family of the same type of instruments. And the families came in all different sizes, just like a string quartet has the small violins to the big double bass. The gambas have the tiny treble viols that you hold between your legs to the great big double bass viols. That's a consort. We have some excellent players here. Wendy Gillespie is playing with us. And as you said, while we were searching CDs, there's hardly a Renaissance viol CD that doesn't have her name on it somehow. Then we have Joanna Blendolf, who is currently the professor of viola da gamba down at IU, playing with us. Erica Rubas, one of the best French gamba players that I know. Robert Bolliard is joining us here from Indianapolis also. Now, why alchemy? There's a good question. If I can say, alchemy is the mixing of different things together to come up with a final product that's greater than the sum of the parts. My idea was, well, you can only do viol consort music so much. So my goal has been to mix it with other artistic elements, with violins, with dancers, recently with American spirituals, to try to create something new. So that's why it's Alchymy Viols.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about this program that we've cooked up together.
Oh, yes.
We're bringing Alchymy Viols with the Cathedral Choir, and we're presenting a program mostly of English music from the Renaissance.
This is the high point of viol music. This was the golden age, without question, when it reached its zenith.
Totally. And so I play the organ for a living, but I'm self-aware enough to know that when in doubt, take the organ out and do other things. And I'm particularly excited because this is music that is often reduced for the organ. So it's written for a viol consort, but unfortunately, most of us don't have a viol consort ready at hand to play on a Sunday morning. So we reduce this music and play it on the organ. But we get to hear this music now as it was originally intended. Yeah, that's right. And we're also doing a little bit of creativity. Our program spans many years from William Byrd, who is one of the fathers of English Renaissance music, and one of the a name that is with him and Tallis, really the foundation of English Renaissance music, all the way to Purcell, who really represents the zenith of the pre-modern age in English.
Exactly right. And still use the viols.
Yes, absolutely. But we're doing one lovely verse anthem that's probably keyboard music, but we're getting a little inventive with it. We're adding viols, and that's an interesting thing about this music, this consort music, that it was written for kind of whatever you had laying around.
Do you know, I think it's a much more a modern idea that what the score said, the score specifies a certain kind of instrument, and that's what you have to play. Back in the olden days, it's, well, who wasn't dead yet, and who wasn't in jail, and who had strings on their instruments, and who could sing.
Absolutely. And so it's interesting listening to recordings of this music. You can find multiple versions of the same piece, particularly this polyphonic style where you'll have one where it's really a song because all of the verses or all of the parts are being played by strings except for one who's a singer who's adding the text. And then you'll have one that doesn't have viols at all. It's just singers. It's really about what you had on hand.
Exactly
And
right.
speaking as a church musician, it's really a lot more practical, Phil.
Oh, yes,
We think
yes.
about J.S. Bach and his cantatas and the very specific scoring of his cantatas and the very specific instruments you had on hand. And there are fights this day about, can we double that? Does it have to be one on a part? Musicologists, this is their first love. They can go on about this for days.
Yes,
But it's really
yes.
fascinating. If you don't have this instrument, you can't play that cantata. Just full stop. But this music is much more flexible, and I think much it shows its nature of being written for the church. Of what did we have today? Who wasn't in jail? How can we make this music work?
Well, and as you had mentioned to me when we were planning this, the idea of the choir boys that sang much of this, well, maybe they would stop singing, pick up a viol, and then play their part in the next verse. They would go back and forth doing this as they were very well trained.
Totally, yeah. So I'm curious about your own path to playing bass viol, Phil. It's not every day that you meet someone that is a professional bass viol player. How did you pick up this instrument?
Started with, recorders and crumb horns long time ago.
Gateway instruments, we call that. Yeah.
Gateway instruments, that's right. And then you try to get all the LPs you can get, and suddenly it was an English Renaissance recording. And I heard the viola da gamba, and then many viola da gambas together, and I was blindsided by it, absolutely. At the same time, Thomas Binkley had just been hired by Indiana University to start the Early Music Institute. With that, they had some of the finest gambists coming in to teach, including Wendy Gillespie. So I thought, oh, what a coincidence. So I asked Wendy if she would teach me, and yes, for like 2-3 years, we got together every week, and she taught me viola da gamba. And then from that, I went on to double bass Baroque violone.
Yeah.
And not ready to stop yet.
Absolutely. Now we've thrown around a couple of terms, Alchymy Viols, and then viola da gamba. Are these interchangeable terms?
Viols and viola da gambas, yes. I think viols is the short, just simply the short version of it.
And is it just sort of the English version? There's a lot of this. If you sit down at an organ, this is really fascinating. It's a little history of Europe encompassed into the stop list, because you might have a trumpet, which is English, or you might have a trumpet, which is French, or you might have a what's the German one? Oh, my organ literature professor is probably rolling his eyes somewhere that I can't remember the German one. But it really tracks these various countries and these various traditions. Is that also true with viola da gamba music, that you have sort of a French school and an English school? And
that's a good question. I think you have more literature that is what we call French literature, which is going to be later than the high point of English literature. The English literature for the viol is going to be exactly what we're doing right now. It's going to be the 1600s and that period. Their type of viols, it's going to be an earlier form of it, probably smaller sound posts, maybe some of the early things here without even a sound post. So yes, you would have those viols. The Italian school had pretty much died out since the violin family took over there. French school was a later school. The research is being done right now, how much the viola da gamba consort was there during the Renaissance. It was, but during the time of Louis XIII, Louis XIV especially, the French solo viol had its heyday. So you have a different kind of literature for that. Germans probably had the viols the longest. Bach used those, and that's going to be more like your big 7 strings. He called them the stille instruments. He reserved them for the quiet music, for funereal music oftentimes.
Yeah, and if we fast forward to next spring, when the Indianapolis Baroque Orchestra and Christ Church Cathedral team up to perform St. John Passion, you have cellos and viola da gambas both scored in that piece, both of these instruments.
As you mentioned, the viols, sometimes it has been said that this is the closest thing to the human voice, the sound. The strings on these are all gut. And they say that the the organic gut strings, which are made from sheep gut, are closer to the way that the human vocal cords are made. They're organic material as opposed to steel.
Yeah.
That's why you get that more human sound on them. Now, it's a softer sound,
Mhm.
but it's a more intimate human sound, human-sized sound also,
Yeah.
as opposed to a huge concert sound.
Absolutely. Now, is there an understanding, or maybe do you have your best guess for why the viola da gamba family died out?
Absolutely. If you look at the progression of instruments from the Renaissance to the present time, it all had to do with making them louder, filling bigger spaces. During the Renaissance, a viol consort might have been played at home, private party, a chapel service, something for a small gathering of people. That's the only space you needed to fill. But as things progressed, you look at the time of Bach and later, you were having concert halls. You could sell tickets for those, and they needed bigger sounds. And look at the orchestra. What was happening to the orchestra? It was getting bigger and bigger. Why? To make a bigger sound.
Yeah.
Gut strings changed over to steel strings. Why? Because it's a louder, bigger sound. Until now, the instruments now, what do they do? The electronic instruments, they're filling football stadiums. They can do it with amplification.
Right.
Viols were too soft. They were steel instruments. They were quiet instruments. They died out.
Yeah. And I'm curious about this this modern resurgence. I mean, we have the whole early music movement, which is out now, even an outdated term. Historically informed performance is now
Right.
the term
Right.
that we refer to. But what really brought the viols back? I mean, and first, who had a viol sitting around in a closet? They could say, "Oh, well, let me pull this thing out and play."
Exactly right. Yes, because some of them were changed into cellos, modern double basses. They didn't want to waste the wood, so they just knocked off the neck.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But what was there a particular impetus that brought back this school of playing, or a particular pioneer who said, "Well, I'm going to make a modern viola da gamba and learn how to play this instrument"?
And there are people who make their livings by making just viola da gambas. That's exactly right. Oh gosh, you're going back to the start of the early music movement. And would you go back to the harpsichord player? What was her name? I'm a Polish harpsichord player. She had the big steel harpsichord.
Yeah.
Do you remember who that was? Landowska?
Something like that.
Something
I know
like
exactly
that.
what you're talking about, and the name's not going to come to me. That much I know.
Yes.
But yeah.
But I think it's the early music movement back then, back in the 70s, late 60s, was not so much about the different kinds of instruments, because they were human-sized instruments, but it was also about the way you play it. When we play a string instrument today, it's a product much of the 20th century Russian school, where every note you play is exactly the same all the way up and down the soundboard. When you sing, every note is exactly the same up and down. But that's not the way that's the writings of the time said it was done. Not anymore. The people don't talk that way. They change their voice from high to low. It has a different timbre to it. They say that's the way the music is to be played. And the early music movement is about treating music the way we treat speech. What is the strong? What is the weak? What's the different sound you get up high? What's the different sound you get low?
Yeah.
So that's we wrap ourselves around that idea. And a smaller choir, like we're doing with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so looking forward to getting to explore this music together as it was originally scored and as often as it was originally intended, which was to be sung in church. We happen to be singing it in a concert. But what I love about church music is where we get to be practitioners of this tradition,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
We're not only doing
Yes.
it as it's not a museum piece, like it will.
It's not history, right?
Exactly.
This is real thing. This is the real thing.
It's a real thing, and it's great to get to be part of that tradition and thinking about how these pieces were, kids, choir boys in the Renaissance learning to play viola da gamba and singing this music, and it's exactly the same today. Our kids are learning this music and being excited about it in the same way those kids were all those centuries ago.
Exactly. And that's one of the things I'm most excited about with this, is getting to work with your youth choir, having that youth sound on the top. That very much is an early music ideal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Phil, I'm so glad that we could chat, and I can't wait to have you on at Christ Church Cathedral on the 14th of May for a 6:30 p.m. concert that we're calling In Song and Verse. Phil, it's always a pleasure to chat with you, and
Always a
thank you so
pleasure.
much for collaborating on this program.
Chris, thank you so much. We're looking forward to it greatly. Thank you.
That it excels.